So the University of Manitoba first introduced best value procurement methodology by the University of Alberta, which was the first higher ed institution in Canada to bring this forward. Now, Arizona's been using this methodology for about 20 years, and I'm going to get this wrong, so I have to look at my notes. It's been taught by Arizona's Performance-Based Studies Research Group, and I always get that acronym wrong. But over the past year and a half, purchasing services have been using this rather actively. They've concluded several very successful projects, attracting and hiring the best suppliers with very successful results. The concept's not designed for use with every procurement, but very effective when we're looking to attract expert, high-performing vendors. Purchasing services already conducted 4 very successful projects, and Paul, I'm going to get you to correct me if I've missed one. Paul DeGauer, Manager of Purchasing Services. We've done, or Paul's team has done food services, cold beverage services, fitness equipment for our new Active Living Center at the Fort Garry campus, and $1 million Windows replacement project at the Bannatyne campus. Have I missed anything, Paul? Okay. So we're really excited because this is the first IT project that we've undertaken using the IT, or the best value procurement methodology. So we're really excited. So to kick things off, I'm going to introduce Kristen Hurtado. Kristen is the Senior Project Manager with the PBSRG at
PSU is easier to say.
At Arizona State University. And she's been instrumental in helping our team and the other purchasing teams through earlier best value procurement projects. And she joins us today from Tempe, Arizona, where they did not have a snowstorm on the weekend. And she's here to help all of us gain the insights needed for our unique RFP. So welcome, Kristen, and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Monique. This wouldn't be an IT if my clicker didn't just fail, right? It's okay, I can still use my hands. I think there's a bit of an echo. Hopefully it's not too distracting. All right, so again, I'm Kristen Hurtado. I'm from Arizona State University, where right now it's probably about 30 degrees Celsius. So it's pretty exciting to be here. Definitely not new to Winnipeg, been many times and all across Canada and the US, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Again, I'm from Arizona State University. I'm here this morning to talk about the new business model that the university is using for this project. I'm also here to help all of you. Right, my goal here is to help you in putting together your proposal responses using this system, answer your questions, run through scenarios, give you examples. So if at any time you have a question, please stop me. I have a tendency to ask the audience questions, so I hope that's okay with you. If it's not, I'm going to talk to myself, and that sounds really weird sometimes. So I noticed all of you are kind of to the right, and it's an interesting phenomenon. Usually it's more spread out, so I wonder if that has to do with IT. We'll find out soon enough. So anyways, let's keep going. So again, I am Kristen Hurtado. I come representing an entire group, a research group. We've been around since 1994, seen thousands of projects. Some of you probably recognize the labels and logos of who all is up in there. Definitely not new to this process. This is, of course, a first for the university in IT, but we've done IT projects for over 12 years. As I said, we are across Canada. So we started off in the University of Alberta in Canada, and then we've kind of swept across every province. So most notably Western University, University of Manitoba, Simon Fraser, University of Ottawa, and the list kind of goes on and on. So once again, I have seen winter. I'm familiar with winter, and I look forward to not being here in the winter for once. So it's pretty exciting. So like I said, as a group, we've been around for over 20 years, seen many projects, also seen IT. Most recently, I had 2 IT projects in Canada, just closed up the other month. So what you'll see here is kind of a range of services and engineering and construction and what have you, commodities that we've procured. We've seen a lot of different things. So again, this is pulling research from all these different areas. We are in the College of Engineering at Arizona State University as well. Anyone been to Arizona? Oh, wow. I'm guessing the Grand Canyon is what brings you, not the 30-degree weather. No? If you don't mind, by a show of hands, can I get a sense of who's in the room? So how many of you are related more in the integration side of IT? Services integration. And then products, software, what have you? Okay, great. So there's kind of an even mix. And how many of you are from Canada? Okay, wow, good majority of you. Great, well, I hope not to offend either parties. I know we do have some of the university folks in the room. Again, I apologize for potentially offending comments. It's all in the sake of education, and again, what we've seen in our experience as a research group. So I hope we can all be friends after this. As Monique said, this has been used at the university in other areas, dining, cold beverage, windows, and gym equipment procurement, and there's been great successes. So again, the university is trying to act differently. They've come across this business model, the best value business model, a different way of doing business, and seeing the positive results. And again, are hoping to see those same results in IT. So why exactly do we want to do things different? I'm going to start with some theory first, and then I'm going to kind of dive into the details of the RFP. But first, I kind of want to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of theory. So why do business differently? Why don't we just keep going on in the same path that we have for many years? Love starting off with a comic, right? How many of you have seen this? Right, you got the change order and then the original contract. It's pretty nice for the guy that owns the boat, right? Not necessarily a win-win situation, though. So keep that in mind. What we've seen in our experiences, this is epidemic to a lot of industries, right? You'll see here failure rates, not only in IT, but in services and engineering and in construction, right? We are seeing significant performance failures. This is happening. And so in response to this, our group has developed a model, which again, I'll go into more detail about. But this is what we're seeing now. Typically when I talk to clients, I ask what they think the failure rate is, and they go, oh, maybe a couple projects here, a couple projects there. But the reality is they happen often, sometimes every day. So if you had to guess, again, most of you have run projects, you've been out there. I myself have been a vendor. I was a vendor before coming to Arizona State University in semiconductor and in construction. So when you ask a vendor, I think it's really clear the answer to this question, right? What is the most important factor for a successful project? Any guesses? It's this whole right-hand side thing. The people on the left usually respond. The people on the right don't. So at the end of a contract, at the end of, let's say, an IT project, we're all cheersing, right? We have champagne in our glasses, and we say, we had a great project because we had a great contract. We had great liquidated damages. Man, that terms and conditions clause, that made this contract. It's the people, right? That's what makes the difference. That's what we've seen in all the projects we've run, is that at the end of the day, the people are the ones that mitigate the risk. The people are the ones that bring value, right? And the university sees that. However, in most instances, we are constrained by our own constraints, right? So if I had to ask you, and again, I'll tell you what clients typically say, what % of RFPs that you've seen are 100% accurate? Someone in the back is truth, yes, 0.
0.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, we can say 1%, just to be nice, because there are clients in the room. When I typically ask this question, everyone goes silent. They say, 90%, right? And so we've seen that's not the case. Now, why does that happen? So this was taken from an IT. Some of you have probably seen it's much longer in the version online. But here we have how the customer explained it. Project leader understood it, analyst designed, consultant described, and then what the customer really needed. So why does this happen? Why do we get so far off? So again, we can do our best with our RFPs. We can only do our best. At the end of the day, again, the people matter. The expertise matters. So we need to find a way to leverage that expertise so we don't have this happening, this disconnect, right? Doing business differently. So another example I'd like to take, I hate this would ever happen to anyone, but let's say for the sake of education you have to get brain surgery. So you need to hire a brain surgeon. And in the traditional approach, again, we're going back to the way things typically are, what would you do? Hire a brain surgeon, right? Would you open the phone book and find the cheapest surgeon out there and give them a call? Would you tell them, you know, I have a holiday coming up, I need this to get done sooner. You said it's going to take 5 hours, can we cut it down to 2? I saw this new procedure online, it looks really great, can we try that procedure and use this other tool instead? What can you expect if you were to do that? How would the outcome be of the surgery? Yeah, you wouldn't want to risk your life on that. Right, but again, this is what we've seen in our experiences happen. How many of you have seen this before? Seen a client treat vendors in this way? You don't have to shake your head. I know if you're on this side of the room, they can still see you. I'm joking. You know, and again, this is not...
This is Wholesale City. We're used to this all the time.
Yeah, okay. You know, and again, this is not necessarily just the university. We've seen this everywhere. This traditional approach, this typical environment. So we're not here to point fingers. We're here to say we want to do things in a different way. So the underlying assumption is that, again, we know people make the difference. We know that you as vendors are not a commodity, right? You're not just a number. You're not just a name. So what we have to do is we have to find a system, right, that allows you to differentiate yourself based on expertise and experience. A system that doesn't treat you as a commodity. That's the system we're looking for. So this brings us to best value. So I've got this picture here, a baby and a parent. Who's the client? The baby or the parent? Who's going to cry and complain and worry about what's going on, right? The baby. The baby's going to cry. And if the baby cries, the client cries, how does that affect you as a vendor? More stress, right? Longer timelines, change orders, issues come up. Happy baby, happy parent, right? That's what we're saying. So best value is really all about the win-win situations. Again, there is no win-lose. It's about creating an environment in which we can both be successful and utilize your expertise. So there's basic underlying principles that our model has, and I'll kind of explain how these follow throughout the process. We've got to be fair, right? In order to use this type of system, this different way of doing business, we have to be open, we have to be honest, and we have to be transparent, right? That's the only way this system will work. And again, I'll explain how this runs through our model. So again, going back to this situation, who's the surgeon, right? Is the surgeon the vendor or the client? Who should know more about performing the services? The vendor or the client, right? The vendor. So in order to do that, we have to understand that clients do their best with RFPs. They do their very best with the scope. But at the end of the day, we are human, and there may be gaps in there. As an expert, as vendors, we're asking you to identify those gaps. We're asking you to take a look from beginning to end and tell us how you're going to get there, right, to make those gaps meet. Basically, we're wanting you to provide us a vision with the project. What do you see is happening, and what could be the potential risks to getting us the impact that the university is looking for, right? So let's switch gears here for a moment. Let's have you put on your client hat. You're an evaluator, let's say. No longer vendors, you're evaluators. University of Manitoba. So the requirement is to purchase a green ball. Now looking at this scenario, which one would you purchase? The shout out answers.
One on the left.
One on the left? Okay.
Just because there's no one sitting there.
Okay. Team player, I like it. You're in the middle, you're not on the right. The bigger question is, what is your criteria to select a certain green ball? And would everyone else agree with that criteria? Would we come up with a unanimous decision in this situation? Right, the answer is no. If I present you with a different situation, same requirement, pick a green ball, which one would you purchase?
The red one.
Be a rogue. We're not actually babies here. This is just an example. All right, so bottom right. And again, this is an example for educational purposes, so let's think about this. In which situation is it really clear where you have your green ball? Right, scenario 2. Which decision requires, which situation requires less decision making, less justification? Which situation is more dominant, right? Scenario 2. So what we're looking for is a model that will allow that differentiation, that will let that in. Now, the part that we have to start thinking about is that if there is no differentiation, right, if you all look like green, different shades of green, it makes it very challenging for a client to see that distinction. So we're asking you to take that opportunity to differentiate yourself and leverage your expertise so that you're not just a shade of green, right, so that you stand out. Should probably stop for questions now because you've all been really quiet. Again, this is theoretical concepts. I'm going to jump in just a second into some of the technical details of the RFP and how this actually plays out. All right. So again, the best value system, this is what we're talking about now. How many of you have downloaded the RFP at this point, or at least seen it's online? Okay. And did anyone watch any of the videos that are already posted, some of the more theoretical? They're really long. You should watch them. I mean, if you have time, definitely watch them. They go into a little bit more of the theory and process behind this. In any case, let's move along with some of the details of this process. So what we have right now are 3 different phases. We have the selection, clarification, which is pre-contract planning, and management and metrics. What happens is all vendors participate here, right, based on specific criteria. Those are rated and weighted, and I'll talk more about those details. We get down to one potential vendor right at this point. No award has been made. Just one vendor has been identified as the prioritized vendor. With that one vendor, we take them through a rigorous and somewhat brief pre-contract planning phase in which you're able to verify your assumptions, to get input from the client, and then the client will have a decision at the end of that phase and during that phase whether or not to proceed to award. Award will happen here. After that, the project begins, execution, and so on and so forth. So, how many vendors go to the second phase?
One.
Just one. How many of you, close your eyes, how many of you think you're going to get to phase 1, right? You better get to phase 1, right? That's the goal. So I'm here to help you figure out how to do that and to strategize best. So let's talk about the criteria. What we have here in phase 1 is your basic proposal. We have past performance information, risk assessment, value assessment, interviews, and client demonstrations. The university will also exercise the right to potentially form a shortlist right at this point, depending on how many vendors propose. So again, all of this criteria is taken into account. Again, we move on to phase 2 with one vendor, get the pre-planning documents, and then execute the project. Really wish my clicker was working. All across the board. So starting with phase 1, start at the beginning. Sometimes they start at the end, but vendors don't tend to like that because you get impatient because you want to just know what you need to do to get to phase 2. So bear with me on that. These are all the attachments listed in the RFP. I'm going to go through them in detail and explain kind of where to take it, what perspective to come at. And you'll see there's criteria and weights assigned to all of these. So again, check the RFP. You'll see, though, that in most scenarios, and typically in IT, cost is not number 1, but in some other industries, cost is the full points. So again, what we're saying here is we know, the university knows you're more than a dollar figure. You have your expertise, you have your best people, and the weights and criteria reflect that. It's not just about cost. And again, I don't know how odd that is for IT. In most scenarios, cost isn't number 1. So, I've got a question for you. How many resources or dollar figure does it take to actually put together a proposal, would you say? Ballpark. Is it free? No, right? It takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, and that converts to money, right? So if you're going to put together a proposal, you want to find the most strategic way to do that. In most industries, what we've seen is that it tends to be the business development and marketing folks that put the proposal together. And what we're saying again is if people matter, we want you to assign your best people to this project. Right? The university wants your best folks. And they want those folks to participate in the proposal process. Right? They'll participate for sure in interviews, and we want them to participate in actually writing the proposal. So how thick would you say your typical proposals are? Bigger? A little bit bigger, maybe a box. I should have brought a box, right? Typically, they tend to err on the side of weight is better. Right? It's kind of like getting your master's thesis where it has to be at least 500 pages, right? That's not the case in this approach. Right? We're asking for very minimal information because we know your time is valuable. We know it takes time to put together proposals, and we want to direct towards the dominant information instead of asking you for all that other information. So keep that in mind as well. Again, we're looking at risks, so potential issues that could happen on the project, as well as value-adding options. So again, if you're that surgeon, you know the best approach, right? The ultimate end is brain surgery, but you know how to get from point A to point B. And that's what's being prioritized in the system. That's how you're differentiating yourselves. So those 4 concepts I talked about before, fair, open, honest, and transparent. I said I was going to come back to them. I'm coming back to them. How can we keep this process, how can it stick to these 4 fundamentals? The answer is right there. Your name can't be on them. Right? So the evaluators, there's an evaluation team that's formed, and they're going to look at your risk assessment and your value assessment and other pieces of your proposal, right? And they can't see your name because that's how we keep the process fair. What do we think about that? I know it's different, right? But again, if we're prioritizing you based on your performance and what you can do and your expertise, right, we have to keep this process fair. Now, there's a cover page, and procurement will know your name, but the evaluators won't know your names. We also have to limit pages, and I'll get more into that in just a second. Any questions? All right. So first off, we have what is called the risk assessment plan. Risk is anything that could cause the project to not be successful. So go back to the happy baby, happy parent situation. We're looking for win-win. If there's anything that could cause the situation to not be win-win, the university wants you to list it on your proposal. And even further, they want you to come up with a plan and how to address that. And I have some examples coming up in just a second that'll help explain that. But again, we're talking about anything at all that could stop this project in its tracks, which means you're not successful and the university is not successful. So the first example I have was taken from a demolition project at Harvard University. And the issue is that noise from the demolition is going to disrupt the students because it's finals week and everyone will be in the library studying. So one vendor came and he said, the solution is that partnering is key to success on any project. We will work with the user to develop strategies that can be implemented to minimize the impact of noise from demolition. Vague. Yeah, I see some of you squinting and shaking your head. Okay, let's take a look at another vendor solution. To minimize this risk, again, same risk, we have planned to do demolition during off hours and weekends. We'll also install rubber sheets on the floor to diminish noise and vibrations. Comparing vendor 1 to vendor 2, who would you rather work with if you're the client? Why vendor 2? Exactly. Vendor 2 has a solution. They've thought about this project. They're trying to come up with a way to minimize this risk. Versus vendor 1 is saying, we'll figure it out when we get there. Project management fundamentals. All right, another risk. This risk was during the escalation of concrete about 13 years ago. And the risk was that this project requires a significant amount of concrete. Again, it's been rapidly escalating. So vendor number 1 came in, and their solution is that the owner can be assured all risks associated with concrete escalations will be eliminated because we offer the benefit of an experienced project team that includes the most detailed, pre-qualified, and extensive list of subcontractors and suppliers from around the world. What do we think? Little bit of like marketing in there, right? We're world class. Okay. Don't make a decision. Look at vendor number 2. Again, same risk, different solution. To minimize this risk, we have secured and signed a contract with a local concrete manufacturer to prevent any increase in cost during the duration of this project. Comparing vendor 1 to vendor 2, what do we think? Vendor 2, okay. Now, the vendor can't just come and say that they've done something, right? We're going to ask for this contract in phase 2. So it's not about making promises, it's about actually taking action, again, to meet the intent of the project and to minimize any potential issues that could come up. Any questions on either of those? Got a couple more. All right. So this risk was taken from a very recent IT project. I don't want to say too much, because again, I know IT, and who knows who was where. So the risk was scheduling and execution of project tasks. One vendor came and said, to minimize this risk, we will have a project manager that is actively engaged on a daily basis who understands what the dependencies are and can clearly define them to minimize any potential delays. What do we think?
It's not as vague as the others, but leave some wiggle room.
Leave some wiggle room? Okay. Well, let's not decide. Let's look at vendor 2. A project manager will be used to manage the schedule and keep the various parties on task. Remember the green ball situation, right? Is this maybe a different shade of green? I mean, what really is the risk here? Here we have an issue of an undefined risk, and a project someone's just going to solve it when we get there. They'll solve it. You know, it's interesting being exposed to IT, especially coming from engineering. A lot of the project management fundamentals that are the framework for engineering are seen as new in IT. Project managers are not new. Schedules are not new. All of this language, again, is kind of fluffy. So just be careful of that and think of that when you're putting together your risk assessment, and know that the evaluators are going to be comparing. So all of the criteria and how to evaluate is in that RFP if you want to see how to be successful. Okay, I've got one more example. This is a good one. So the risk is a poor roofing system can result in roof leaks, which may inconvenience building occupants, increase complaints, maintenance, damage the building, and be a source of mold. So what vendor 1 said. To minimize this risk, our proposed roofing system has been installed on over 400 roofs, an average roof age of 18 years, 99% of the roofs don't leak, and 100% of the end clients are satisfied. Well, we're the evaluator, so let's compare. Let's look at vendor number 2. Vendor number 2 said, to minimize this risk, we are proposing a thermally welded roofing system that has a tensile strength of 2,130 psi, 300% elongation, tear strength of 312, tested for 10,000, and has a cold brittleness of negative 30 degrees Celsius.
That's not cold here.
I knew someone was going to say that. I made a mental note to adjust that to negative 50, but I forgot. Only in Canada. Are any of you roofing experts? So maybe I'm the closest to a roofing expert, and I'm by no means an expert. What do we think of vendor A versus vendor B? Sorry?
1% leak.
They have umbrellas inside.
What about that 1%? So comparing the two, right? Both have numbers. They have numbers. But is there a difference between vendor A's numbers and vendor B's numbers? Does it take an expert to understand what vendor A is saying?
Yep.
We're good.
What about vendor B?
Yep.
Again, I want negative 50 degrees Celsius. I want, 50,000 pounds, if I can. Bigger is better? I don't know. Again, keep in mind the evaluators are going to be looking at your proposal. They need to see that dominant differential. Now, vendor A requires what? What did they do to get to those numbers? Did they just make them up?
Maybe.
If they did, what are we going to do? Exactly, phase 2. So you can't just say something in your proposal and it becomes true, right? It takes performance measurement, which a lot of you probably do. one thing I didn't mention is that our business model came from the strategies of successful high-performing vendors. And those actually measure their performance and have this information. So I realize it's going to take a little bit of time to put this together. And again, if you have questions, let me know. But we can clearly see the difference right here between performance information and technical information. Any questions on that one? All right. I lied. This is my last example. More examples, the better, right? So this was taken from a project that was to replace baseball fields. And so the risk was the local water company must have the water fields turned on by June in order for us to water the newly installed recreation fields, or the grass will die. Is this Canada or is this Arizona? Arizona, right? So vendor one came in and said, the solution is we will coordinate and plan our schedule with the water company as soon as the award is made to make sure that we get water to the site to irrigate the fields. What do we think? So now we're getting better. Without even reading vendor two, we're already saying we have questions, right? Vendor two, same risk, different solution. To minimize this risk, we will coordinate our schedule with the water company as soon as we are awarded the project. If they fail to meet our schedule, we can connect temporary water lines to the nearby fire hydrants, or we can also rent water trucks to irrigate the fields. Who would we rather work with, A or B? B. What's different about vendor vendor one versus vendor two?
More contingencies if some plan A goes wrong.
Exactly. This first part of the risk is exactly the same as the other vendor, right? But they know in their experience that probably the water company is not going to be there because they've worked with them before. So they have a plan B. Exactly. This is an example of a non-controllable risk. So in this case, in the US, this is a public utility that no one has basically any control over. So your non-controllable risks are not meant to be included in your cost. Right? If the vendor included this in their cost would be a lot higher than vendor one, right? We're just asking for non-controllable risks for you to have that plan to address that. We're not asking you to include non-controllable risks in your cost. Now the controllable risks, which were the previous ones you saw, right, where the subcontractor and the project management and the schedule, that should be included in your cost. Does that make sense? We're not asking you to control what you can't control. Question?
So I assume we're the ones that are writing the risk as well as the solution.
Yes.
So showing greater understanding of the risk is probably as important as showing greater understanding of the solution.
Yes.
So in this example, obviously two understood and demonstrated the understanding of the risk even more so
Yes.
than one, right?
Right, they leverage their expertise. Going back to that IT example with we have schedule issues and a project manager will take care of it. I mean, that's an example of a poor definition of a risk. Another issue that is common in construction is someone will die. We have safety issues. Do we as a client expect anyone to die on our projects? No. So that's an example of something you probably don't want to put in your proposal. All right, so that's risk assessment. Now we're going to move on to the second piece, which is value assessment. If no one has any other questions. And I'll be here after if you have questions. So transitioning, what we're talking about now is a value assessment plan, value-added ideas. How many RFPs are 100% accurate? Slim to none, right? So what we're asking is that, given the information that is in the RFP, looking at all of that, is there anything that we missed? Is there anything that could be leveraged to increase our satisfaction as a university, to maybe decrease cost, and to maybe decrease or impact the schedule in a positive way? So again, those three pieces, cost, time, and satisfaction or quality, those are kind of the main three tenets of value, and the main three tenets of risk as well. Something, again, that impacts success, in this case, increases success, makes the project better. So what we're asking is you to put these ideas down, and those will become part of your proposal as well. Got a handful of examples after this. So this was taken from a military base in which the client was having issues with leaks coming into the military base. Out of all of the vendors that proposed, Only one of them actually went on the roof and took a look at what was happening and said, actually, your water leaks are not just coming from your roof, right? The majority of the leaks are caused by cracks in the walls, broken missing glass, poor caulking. For an additional amount of time and money, we can repair and replace all these issues to minimize water leaks. So again, think about that tire swinging example. If the vendor had just done what was asked, which is repair the roof, would the leaks have stopped? No, they wouldn't have stopped. So again, looking at that intent and trying to meet that intent, leverage your expertise. Do what you can to add value to the project. There may be no value you can add to the project, but in all the projects I've seen, again, we're humans. We can come up with different ways. Clients, in some instances, owners don't see what you see day in and day out. Right? They have a lot of other things to manage, a lot of other things going on. Some may run a project once a year or once every 10 years. In IT, I think it tends to be the once in every 10 years situation, right? Where there's a lot of long-term projects going on, and all of you have probably seen that as well. So leverage that understanding, leverage that technology, that newness in your value assessment plan. Got another example. So this was a lighting system. The vendor said that you can save 20% in your cost if you substitute the T3 lighting system for the T2. T3 lights are newer, state-of-the-art systems that are known industry-wide as the best systems. Put on your client hat, what do you think? Get some head nods this way, that means not really sure.
Yeah.
Say that again?
You live in more proof. These are just kind of general statements.
Exactly, these are general statements. So if I'm the client, right, I want to know other things like who's used it? How do we know they're industry-wide? Even in IT, right, I'm thinking maintenance. I'm thinking long-term. Okay, initially it looks good, but what happens after 5 years? What are the impacts? How does this work in my own environment? So again, don't just throw ideas. Try to find a way to leverage those 3 pieces we talked about: cost, time, quality, and satisfaction. And think about that in ways to increase value to this project. Questions? How are we doing on time? Anyone need coffee? Just go ahead. I won't make you sing if you go get coffee or a cookie. All right, so let's talk more details. Like I said before, fair, open, honest, transparent. It's also got to be efficient, right? We don't want you submitting tons of information, boxes and boxes. We want to get to the dominant differential. So that requires the risk assessment to be 2 pages. There's one for the controllable risks and one for the non-controllable risks. The RFP's got the templates. And then value added is also 1 page as well. How many pages? 3 pages, right? There's other things that are asked for, but these are the 3 that are evaluated by the committee.
Small.
Say that again?
Print small.
Very small. Yep, very small. One of the other pieces that we ask you to turn in is past performance information. I'm letting you know about this because it's probably going to take some time. What you're going to have to do is contact your previous clients and ask them to complete a survey. So we don't want surveys coming from third parties or other vendors. We want them coming from clients that have implemented similar solutions. And there's a survey that they'll answer and rate you on a scale of 1 to 10. Those surveys, we're asking to be collected on the firm. So in this case, it'd probably be the integrator, the project manager, who is the individual, the technical lead, who is also a person, and the solution or system itself. So that's 4 pieces. And again, the survey is in the RFP. So again, what you'll have to do is send these to a previous client. If all 4 of these were used on the same project, you can put all their names on 1 survey. If you have different projects going here and there, they'll have to be different surveys. We want just 1 individual evaluating that. We want just per project, only 1 evaluation. So you can't have different clients evaluating the same project. It's just got to be on 1 specific project. You'll take all that information, an average score will be calculated, and that'll become part of your proposal as well. Got some more screenshots to show you. The survey does require you to input in some information up front, so you'll have to write down who it's going to, their phone number, their contact information, and then you'll have to write the name of your company and or the project manager and or the technical lead and or the solution or system. Again, they can all be on there if they were used on the same project. that you'll have to identify the name of the project and then input in your fax number or email back to you. So we don't want the surveys coming directly to us, we want them coming to you. You'll package them and put that with your proposal as well. Again, all the attachments are in the RFP. This exact attachment is in the RFP. So again, it's going to take a little bit of time, so you'll want to do that sooner rather than later, because especially with summer, and I know vacations and holidays pop up pretty quick. And another shot of how this looks. Again, you'll just be taking those numbers and calculating an average score. I believe we have a maximum of 5 surveys per entity. Questions on that? Yes?
Maximum of 5 surveys per entity. You mean per vendor or per?
Per entity, sorry, I use the RFP term. Entity is one of these 4. So the vendor, the integrator, right, the project manager, technical lead, and solution or system. 5 for each of those. And again, if they were all used on the same project, that counts as 1 for all of them. We don't want you to have to duplicate it.
Can you clarify that again? So,
Sorry.
if I have 5 customers, that means I can have up to 5 individuals per customer?
5 individuals. So the entities are also the name of the company as well. So you have a previous project, and let's say, for all intents and purposes, the integrator was the same, the project manager was the same, the technical lead, and the solution or system. 1 survey for all 4 of those. If you got another project where it was only the integrator and the project manager, that just counts for them. But each of these entities can have 5 references. That's the maximum.
Kristen, what is the impact if you submit less than 5?
So no one will be penalized here in terms of surveys submitting 3 versus submitting 4. What happens is that probably what you'll do is you'll send out more. I would suggest to send out more than 5. Again, holidays are coming up, people get busy. Send those out. Hopefully you get at least 5 back. Most vendors pick their best 5 and submit that as well. So again, we don't need to see all the surveys that you send out. You cast your net. Just give us the 5 that you want to count towards your proposal.
So obviously it's in relation to the proposal, right? So it's not just any project you've ever done as an organization. It's specific to this. So just as a point of reference, in security space, none of my customers want to be referenced. So I'm not going to be able to go to the bank and say, can you tell me how great of a job I did on this survey? They're going to say, you know, we don't do that. Because they do not want any outside entities knowing what products they use. So my struggle in this space, in this particular instance, this past performance piece is not relevant because none of my customers want to be referenced.
Does anyone else have that issue as well?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
kind of a general.
Yeah, it's a
you know,
consensus.
security.
And I think for the purposes of this session, what we'll want you to do is submit that question in writing to procurement so we can take some time to formally respond to that, because that's something that I don't think we had considered at the time, that they wouldn't want to name, again, their system and then someone can see their holes. I don't know if there's a way to address that confidentiality, so let us think about that and then respond back to you. All of the questions and answers will be posted, but again, you'll have to submit yours formally, please.
Yeah, and what happens in these, the fact that we're not getting security and cybersecurity is so
Right.
much in the news, is that we'll do reference calls, but not anything in writing. So we'll set
Okay.
up a reference call with a client on the phone, they have a discussion, they talk, and honestly, most of the time, I'm not even on the reference call, because if I'm on the reference call, the clients don't talk, as
Right.
openly as they would. But that doesn't leave like a written trail, it's something that people can access. And so, I mean, I can think of some clients that this wouldn't be an issue, but
Okay.
overall it's an issue.
Okay, yeah, definitely. We'll get back to you with a response. Thank you for bringing that up. And again, like I said, any questions we'll just want to formally document as well, because this is more of an education piece. But just bring up any issues you may have. I know I saw some other hands in the back. Was that just related to the same issue? I'll just assume it was. Okay. All right, so we will address that. So to give you a vision of how this whole process works and how this will go down on the 16th, you'll turn in your proposal, all of the documents, all of the attachments that are asked for in the RFP. You'll submit that to procurement. What procurement is going to do is they're going to separate the evaluated versus the non-evaluated documents. Again, this is how we keep fair, open, honest, and transparent. There are things that'll have your name on it, once again, that the evaluators will not see. Those will go into the evaluation matrix, all your costs, past performance, and whatnot. And then your risk assessment, value assessment, those are going to go to the evaluation members. They're going to use the system, again, listed in the RFP, rate everything on a 1, 5, 10 scale, comparative, independent. They're going to sit at their desk, lock their door, don't let anyone disturb them, and submit their evaluations back to procurement. Procurement's going to take the evaluations and spit out an average score. And again, at this time, the university will have the option to shortlist. What comes next is the interviews and client demonstrations. So that's, again, kind of how the process will flow. It'll be very, very quick turnaround time in terms of what you've probably traditionally seen. Any questions on how logistically that works?
I had a question just around the evaluated documents and keeping them anonymous. So is there a step that procurement actually goes through all evaluated documents to ensure that there's no inferences that could be?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll happen right here.
And what would happen if that was identified?
So right now, the way the RFP is written, I believe, is the university has the right to remove that information.
Okay.
But again, we would advise you not to. I've had situations where, you know, by accident or not, a vendor disclosed who they were. And I mean, when you're missing like this much in black of your risk assessment, no one can understand what you're trying to say. So I would definitely advise to, you know, do your best. Maybe have someone else read it just to double check before you submit it, because you're at a disadvantage when you name yourself and we kind of scratch that stuff off. Doesn't read clear. But yeah, your name will be on the cover page, so we'll know who you are.
Yep.
Procurement will know who you are.
Just because you made an indication that if there's project references that could be identifiable in some way or form, just if they're unique, that might be possible. And so just trying to understand how to make sure that that doesn't.
Yes, I mean, I would definitely, again, caution you all. When things do have to be modified, you know, we don't see it getting to that point because I am telling you the directions in advance.
Yeah.
But you are at a disadvantage when you do that, because then procurement has to make a judgment call, and that's, you don't really want to put yourself in that situation.
Is that possible? So, right here, I think I understand what Jeff is saying. So, let's say you're a vendor and there's a particular feature that you have that reduces risk, and you're the only one possibly that can do that. So that's something that's identifiable, but to a vendor, however, it's a differentiator, what you're looking for, that mitigates risk, promotes success. Something like that would
Yes.
not be linked out, correct?
So a good example I can think of is in the cold beverage industry, right? Where you have certain soda machines that actually only one vendor has versus another. If those are described, right, if the intent is there, there's no issue. But if you say we use XYZ product and XYZ solution, that has to be taken out. So I would say do your best to describe the functionality or what it does that provides value, not necessarily its name or the bank name that you used it on or whatever client.
Okay.
And again, keep in mind we have both technical experts and non-experts that are on the evaluation committee as well. So, you know, back to that roofing solution, if you're saying 3,000 PSI and 10,000 pounds versus the performance of your value-adding benefit, you know, definitely use performance versus some of that technical piece. Other questions? All right, best is yet to come. So again, we put our money where our mouth is. We say people make the difference. How many of you have participated in interviews or proposal presentations in the past? Most of you? Okay. Typically, what we've seen is done is that it's kind of in this fashion where someone gets up, presents, has a PowerPoint. Typically, in our experiences, it's been related to marketing or business development who gives that presentation. And so these interviews are different in that none of that is allowed. What is conducted is that the project manager, again, this is the person that's assigned to this project, and the technical lead that is assigned to this project are interviewed in an individual basis. So the typical setup will be some form of round table. The evaluation committee will be sitting there. Someone will have a list of questions, and they'll ask that individual those questions. And then the evaluators are going to rate, once again, comparatively, independently, and on a scale of 1, 5, and 10. So again, there's no presentations, there's no kind of marketing sense of this. It's just, you're assigned to this project, I want to meet you. If I'm the university, I want to know who I'm going to be working with. I want to make sure they've thought about my project and have a sense of the risks and the potential issues and how to mitigate those. Different from the traditional system. Again, the goals are really just to meet them, to make sure they have done their due diligence. We won't be doing anything via phone or anything like that. It's going to be in person. The project manager will be interviewed first, and then the technical lead will be interviewed. They won't be interviewed at the same time. A little bit more, again, of how it's actually going to look. So again, they're going to be interviewed individually. No one else will be there. They'll be interviewed separately. No notes will be allowed. And I believe right now we have the interviews lasting about 30 minutes. So it is, again, down to the dominant information. I'll talk a little bit more about the questions and types of responses. But again, it's going to be very, very basic, very risk-focused, very value-focused. So what are the types of questions we ask? They're very non-technical. What the evaluators are looking for, again, is thought behind the project. Has this person read the proposal? Have they thought about my project? Are they looking out for my best interests, right? Have they identified how to add more value to my specific project? You know, clarity is very important. It's not necessarily, you know, how someone says something is very important, how they can articulate what exactly is their plan to address these risks or to meet the needs of this project. I've got some comic relief in just a minute about what not to do in interviews. But if you have any questions in the meantime, let me know. I'll try to not laugh too much. So these are taken from actual interviews that we've run. We had a education, just like I'm having today, and I said, don't do this, and people still did this. So I don't want to point fingers, but I think this could still happen in the interviews, right? Don't get to the interviews and be at a point where that individual is not prepared to answer these questions. Have them sit down, have them read the proposal, have them look at the proposal and participate in that in some way. So from a real interview, this was taken. I have no idea why I'm here today. My boss called me last night and told me to show up for this interview. $10 million project, right? No big deal. I didn't participate at all in preparing our proposal. People say these things. I didn't write the risk assessment. It was prepared by our admin or support staff. I was just assigned to this project, and I'm not sure if our schedule is realistic. Ouch. Being honest. I'm not currently employed by this company, but if we win this project, then they will hire me.
Did they win?
What do you think? I've never managed a project of this size or scope.
Only bigger.
Only bigger, right? Twice the size. There is no risk on this project. The greatest risk I always face is how to accomplish all of the things that our sales team promised. Again, I apologize if you're in sales. No offense here. So think about this as you're putting together your team, as you're preparing for the interviews. Again, I'm trying to help you strategize on how to be successful in this. The questions will be very simple, but again, the answers are very revealing if you have or have not thought about this. One thing that this comment kind of brings to mind is, you know, let's say, what if you take a look at the RFP and you don't see any risks at all? You look at the scope and you say, perfect, 100%, right, 100% RFP. I'm joking, right? If you don't have any questions, if there's no issues with the scope, it's probably a miracle. But in that case, what you'll want to do is approach it from the perspective of what are the risks the other vendors have, right? Take a look around. Look at your competition. What could potentially go wrong if that project is awarded to a different vendor? What do you provide that other vendors don't? How can you mitigate that impact? So again, I question when someone says there are no risks on this project. Again, leverage your expertise. What risk could happen if you aren't given the project? Different way to approach it. All right, so that was interviews. Any questions before I go forward on the interviews? What to expect? All right. So next is client, let's call it illustrations. Often the term demonstration is kind of taken out of context. The vision that comes to mind is a vendor kind of showing the bells and whistles of their system, showing how it works, navigating through the system. And I mean, let's face it, you know your system better than anyone else. But are you going to be here for the next 5 years at the University of Manitoba navigating all of that for everyone? I mean, the university is really concerned about how this will actually fit in their environment. So what they want to do is they want to see a previous client that you have that's actually implemented this solution or a similar solution and walk them through at a very high level. Now I know again we brought up the security piece, so I'm sure there'll be a question about security that we can definitely speak to, and I'll ask you to formally submit. But basically, again, we're not asking to see any confidential information. We're asking to see, can the user log into the system? How does the system work? Basic kind of requirements that show that this is not a PowerPoint presentation, that this is not a concept, that this system has actually been used and has been successful. So this is going to take a little bit more due diligence, again, in trying to find a client that's able to do this. How it'll actually work is what you'll do is, again, establish this beforehand, and the university will be sending out shortly what that actually would look like. It'll be roughly an hour. And what you'll do is go to that client site, set up some kind of login system to where the evaluators, again, they'll be sitting at a round table so they can see your client actually navigate through the system and go through the questions that they have.
I think this has more legal impacts than the surveys.
More legal impacts? Okay.
Significantly, because
Yeah.
if you're not gonna ask for anything confidential, then you're not gonna see anything meaningful either. That's the biggest issue I see with this. I mean, if you're going to find someone willing to show it, it's a challenge.
The challenge is the type of system because it actually contains personally identifiable information, which would have privacy impact. So it's because of this particular type of solution that there might be concerns from clients demonstrating.
Is there any way to, in the scenario of how to actually create something, there's generic information that's produced versus an actual live record?
Usually
So
their
John
lab
Smith.
is just a copy.
Say that again?
Usually their development lab, even if it's like, not real-time information, it's still real information.
Okay. Yes?
Will this just be for the selected vendor that's coming out of that first phase? Or
How we
Just
have
be
it
a
right now
service.
is this is a very high level that is actually part of the first phase. The second phase would be what you would typically see as the more detailed demonstration, some more of the finer details.
I don't even know if this is an option, but, what we have, I'm sure the other vendors have, we have demonstration systems that show the end result, right? And so you'll have a mock-up HR system. You'll have maybe a PeopleSoft system, a database, and you go through the use cases that most clients are looking to satisfy. And from your requirements here, you can pretty much come up with some viable use cases that map back to the requirements. And we show that to clients. Is that a possibility? Because for a client, if it's a real-time system, there's real-time data. And what we do, this is an identity management system, right? So we're managing users' identities.
Right.
Right? And while, plus for the people running these systems at night, they get fired for doing this, right?
Right.
So,
I think what we'll need to do is give the university time to respond to this. If one of you can submit this question formally. Again, the intent is not to compromise any of that. They're trying to minimize the risk of getting a solution that hasn't been used, that hasn't been tested, and whatnot. So I think there'll be some discussions around how to address that. Because again, they don't want to compromise your situation either, or your clients.
Well, it's as much for you too, for the university, because if you're just asking to see the end result, everyone can show you the end result. It's the how you do the end result that is the differentiator. So it's as much anything wanting to be able to show the university that value as well, as opposed to just a customer showing someone log in.
that's true. That's a very
Yeah.
true statement. We as vendors, we can show you a big demo, and end user can show you a functional system. The question is, how did you get there? Right, and, you know, that's answered by some of the other parts of this RFP process, but the real question is the how did you get there? So if you're doing those demos with the client real time, your better questions are, okay, yeah, this is, I like what I see here, but how did you get to this point? And again, that's part of the other, you know, section of the RFP, so just some stuff to think about.
Yeah, definitely, you know, the university will respond to that and see the best way to not compromise anyone's security. That's not the intent at all. So, all right. So how this will all look in the end, again, once we've run through all of the criteria, this is probably more detailed than you want to see. There's an Excel file that puts all of this together, and that's been made available to you as well online, so you can see how the scores are calculated. And again, that's how we're transparent and honest about what's being done. And so you'll see all the criteria on the left, all of the weights, and what'll happen is that this model will spit out, you know, the highest ranking vendor, the one that has the highest points. So again, just so you know how the process actually works, we have a model that's behind all of this. So moving on now to the second phase of this process, the clarification or pre-contract planning phase. What's basically done, again, we can go back. How many vendors compete in phase one? All of you. Phase two? Just one, exactly. So again, you'll be the one that gets to phase two, one of you will be. And the goal with this phase is really to minimize shark attacks, to minimize anything that could take that successful project and throw it right out the window, whoever it comes from. Right, again, your success is the university's success. So what are the issues that could get in the way, that could cause the university or you to be surprised? That's what we're looking for. So what are some of the things you just pop in your mind that could actually cause a surprise? Like what could be a potential issue? Why would the baby cry? Okay. So you're not giving it what it needs? What else? Do clients care at all about cost? What if it costs more than you said? What if it doesn't meet certain requirements? What if it doesn't come on time as when they expected it? There's a whole list of things you can think about that could cause surprises. And the point of this time period, this month, again, that the university has said, you know, typically there's no time for this in the traditional phase. There's no, let's stop and make sure we're okay, make sure we're on the same page, make sure you didn't miss anything. Typically it's, let's award and just get the real project started, right? And in engineering construction, it's worse. It's like a disease. It's like they don't even see, you know, beginning to end. It's just day one is award. So it's pretty neat that the university is asking us to take this time, giving you this opportunity. So what could be some of the things that we would ask for? And again, these are all in the RFP. Typically, cost ends up being a high priority in that, and so additional details will be asked about your cost verification, cost breakdown. Pre-planning, so maybe you need to come on site, maybe you need to do more kinds of scenarios. A good way to think about this is that in phase one, you're kind of operating in a vacuum. You've taken what we've given in the RFP and the scope, and you can ask questions. But in phase two, we're saying, okay, the vacuum goes away. We're here. Let's make sure we have a successful roadmap for this project. Assumptions, right? That's a common thing. Again, we don't want you to have to make assumptions, but we do realize that ends up being part of the process. Use the question and answer period. Try to get those ironed out. You know, but again, we know that there are some gaps that we'll want to make sure are cleared before the project begins.
You know, I have a question. It goes back to the client real-time demonstration.
Okay, sure.
Right? So, say we set this up, the client's doing the demo. Who's on your end? Because, you know, part of this is to keep the vendor anonymous, right? So, on your end, who's going to be looking at that real-time demo from the client?
Yeah,
not who the person, but just
right.
the roles.
Good question. I think when it comes down to interviews, I've thrown around the idea of blindfolding the evaluators, and they don't like that. So I think we can only hold anonymous to a certain point. You know, it could be that some of the folks know who the individuals are, and that's where it kind of goes away. With demonstrations, you may have your logo, you may have identifying information. So there's only so much we can control for that.
Okay.
But it will be, to answer your question, it will be the evaluation committee.
Okay, which will have technical people on.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, technical and non-technical. Good question though. Okay, so going back to phase 2, again, some of the other pieces we're going to ask is making sure everyone's on the same page in terms of the project plan, how this will be executed, documentation of performance. So at the end of the day, again, going back to that champagne toast at the end of the project, what is everyone choosing to? How do we know that this project was a success? What are the things, what are the tangible things, the numbers, the cost, whatever it is? What are those metrics that you're going to be measured against? That's all defined in phase 2 as well. Again, more risks may come up, more issues may, kind of be known and pop up, and those will need to get resolved as well. Some of you may have the benefit of having run similar projects before and can, once again, leverage that expertise. Think about how some of the mistakes don't have to happen again on this project. Again, phase 2 is when that discussion happens. Good news is we don't limit pages in phase 2, right? You can have as many pages as you want. The more concise, obviously, the better, because this will actually become part of the contract. So essentially, you're writing part of your contract, which is, again, quite unique. Probably the more usable piece, right? The go-to documents that can say, this is what we agreed on costs, this is what we agreed on assumptions, schedules, and so on. So that, once again, is a unique factor. Any questions on phase 2? I have questions. So, knowing that you're going to make it to phase 2, one of you, what are you going to do today? Or tomorrow? Or before the 16th? Maybe some of these things, right? Start laying this all out, knowing that we're going to be asking for it. And in reality, once again, we've modeled our business model based off of high-performing vendors' tendencies, what they do. They have to do this to be able to get to a cost. Clients think that you just throw a number out there and say, whew, here's the project budget, right? This is what works. The truth is you have to do a lot of homework to get there. You have to do this already. So we're just asking for this information from the vendor we know that has the highest potential, right, that we potentially could award to. We're not asking it of everyone. Again, that's how we conserve the resources. Save your time. Any questions on phase 2? All right. So phase 3 is kind of just brief. Again, this is after the award decision has been made. This is the contract execution. This is the real project getting started, but not really. So what will happen is that the university will ask you to document and track your performance on a weekly basis. Once again, any risks that pop up, those will be documented so that in the end, everyone will know what was decided, why it was decided, and any issues that came up. The good thing is that pre-planning phase that you did, if any of those risks come up, I mean, you've already got your plan ready in your back pocket, and you just have to document it, that it happened. The client will also provide a rating on a scale of 1 to 10 on how things are going as well with that particular issue. So it gives you some feedback as well. So that's the balance of phase 3. So, once again, we have 3 different phases. Phase 1, or selection, is kind of the high-level overview, the dominant differential, getting it down to cost, past performance, risk and value interviews, and client illustrations. Right, then we get down to phase 2, which again is with one vendor, the rigorous pre-planning, pre-contract clarification phase. Once that's complete, the university has the option to award to that vendor based on the outcome. That award is made, and then we move on to metrics and performance documentation. This is a really long slide. I suggest you read it later. What it contains is advice. Again, we've been doing this for 20 years. I educate clients, and I educate vendors, and I educate everyone in between. And I will say, again, that there are strategies that high-performing vendors do. These are the things they do. Find your best people. Thinking now what the project is, what the scope is, you probably have a couple people in mind of who, or maybe yourself, who's going to be assigned to this project. Lock all of them in a room, give them the donuts, the cookies, the Tim Hortons, right? Tell them, here's the requirements, right? How can we actually get from A to B? How can we meet that intent? We know phase 2 is coming, we know we're going to get it. right? Let's plan for this. Let's do this proactively. Once again, strategies of successful vendors. I know that sometimes it's challenging to, in our industry, in this industry, assign your best people right away and know who they're going to be. But again, knowing the university's intent and what they want to accomplish, do what you can based on your own internal constraints. Again, more advice. I could just keep going on and on. It's just, at this point, they've done their best with the RFP. If there's any questions at all, we really don't want you to hesitate asking those. It's not in your benefit to withhold information. It's not in your benefit to not disclose something, because once again, in phase 2, it's going to come out, and you don't want to put yourself at risk for that. There's different things that could pop up, and if you're not comfortable asking it today, don't worry. Again, submit the question, ask the question instead of not asking the question. I have the schedule up here, but you all can kind of see again that all in the RFP. So if I haven't offended you enough, ask me questions. Yes?
There's one question. You said you got to post. Oh, sorry.
You need to speak in the microphone.
Sure. Right. It's a really easy one. You said you're going to post the video in a week or so, but we'd like to get started as soon as possible. Is it possible to send out this presentation today to everyone?
Yes. And again, do check the links that they provided that have some other background videos and slides as well. More questions? Paul.
I'm gonna go up front.
Oh, perfect. You didn't have to raise your hand.
So, Kristen asked me earlier if I needed any time to say anything, and I didn't think I did. Well, I wanted just to address you on a point as I'm listening to this myself, and I've heard this a few times, but I wanted just to wrap up a couple of different slides that Kristen had into what I would call total cost. Because, as Kristen mentioned, we have the weighting in our criteria, and you mentioned that the cost is not the most important factor or the highest weight of 250 out of 1,000. But it's equal as well to other scores, and it's not that the cost isn't important to us. When we wrap it together, you remember the slide where she showed the yacht and the dinghy, where we've got the dinghy being the original contract and the yacht being the change orders. And that total cost is huge in the traditional method. In the best value method, that total cost gets minimized significantly. So our total cost is much lower in best value, even though the weight isn't high on the bid price, or the proposal cost that you submit. We have experienced that in our projects, we've had 4 so far as mentioned, in all of them we've saved millions of dollars together. So this is something that we're looking at, and this will happen as well. In this project, we know we'll save significant amount of dollars. Time is worth money, the dollars themselves. Your proposal cost will probably be lower than you would normally propose on a traditional RFP. Why? Because I think one slide that I've seen before in the other presentations is your biggest risk in a traditional RFP is normally what? When you're looking at a project and working with a client. What is your biggest risk in a traditional method?
Unknown.
The unknown?
Requirements change. Yeah.
How about the client themselves? How about the client, the baby, the whiner, the complainer, I want this, I want that, I want to change this? Is that a risk to you that you're going to have trouble containing that cost when you've got a client that's changing its mind or adding things or not arranging it all up front? So in this method, in the clarification phase, everything is clarified and you know what you're getting into. There aren't going to be those issues where the client gets in your way. You have an opportunity to propose a lower cost to the university because we're going to get out of your way. We're going to let you be the experts, and you're going to show that expertise in running this project. We've seen it in the 4 projects that we've run. We've also seen it in many other projects where we have a center of excellence across Canada for universities, and we meet regularly and talk about all our projects. We've seen from the examples that you've had in American universities and public sector as well, where this has been effective. So I just wanted to share that if I could. I was sort of chomping at the bit of putting these together, that cost does matter. And we've saved millions. We are going to have a lower cost project. We know we will. And it's through this process that we will achieve this. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Paul. Question? Oh, microphone.
After the interviews are completed and the work is awarded, what happens if one of the, I guess, the interview resources or those resources becomes unavailable due to unexpected events, sickness, family?
Good question. So if the person who's interviewed and assigned to the project changes, that's something that will have to be addressed at the time by the university. The intent is for that not to happen. So again, that'll have to be addressed at the time. Going back to Paul's comment, I didn't want to offend clients in the room too much, but in the research that we've done with our group on over 2,000 projects, 99% of the risk comes from the client. So again, it's the elephant in the room, but they are their own worst enemy, and it's not to say that it's intentional, but things happen. Again, we're humans, we're trying to get the best outcome, but again, that tree swing slide, that does happen, because at the time of RFP and the time of scope, sometimes clients aren't aware of all that's out there and may change their minds, and again, it's not always intentional.
Hi, I have a question about the costing or the pricing. Is the time to ask that? So the RFP indicates $1 million as a budget, and it's intended to include hardware, software, professional fees, travel, training. And when I look at attachment 1, it also includes ongoing maintenance and license fees for years 1 through 5. So all of that in total should be $1 million or less?
That is the intent, but if you have a question on that or that doesn't seem right, we need to be aware of that, because again, the due diligence says that's how much that is anticipated, but if that's incorrect, please let us know.
So,
Kristen, I can just make a quick comment about that. That's intended to be kind of the capital cost, not the ongoing operational cost for the project. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I won't wander over and get a microphone.
It's for the recording.
Yeah, in recording. Oh, okay, for a
recording. Yes, of course. So I guess just to clarify that those $1 million costs are the upfront capital costs, if you want to call it that, of the project. The ongoing maintenance, that would be part of the operational budget, so not necessarily part of that $1 million that was put forward.
Just in the attachment 1, though, it indicates that it is part of the total cost.
It's part of the total cost we're expecting you to submit as part of your proposal, but not necessarily part of that $1 million. The $1 million is kind of, so it would not include ongoing maintenance within that $1 million.
But it would include so servers and stuff like that?
Yes, it would.
So we'll have to change that and address that in an addendum. So if you could submit that question, because you identified there was an issue with the RFP, we'll need to correct that.
So is that $1 million, is that a firm ceiling, or is that a guideline?
It's the budget. So we have not stated in the RFP that we will disqualify bids. Again, if it is a question that will impact, That's a very good question, and because we didn't address it in the RFP, the assumption that I'm making on behalf of my clients is that that was the budget figure. In RFPs that I've worked on in the past, sometimes we say, this is the budget, if you exceed it, your bid will be disqualified. Sometimes we say, we expect projects of this nature to become in a particular range. In this particular instance, all we have done is give you the budget. If you have a specific question as to what will happen if we don't think your budget is realistic and we need to quote higher, I'd suggest that you submit it in writing. We'll take it back to our clients and we will address it so that everyone has the answer to that question. It's a good question. Thank you.
So in the RFP, it talks about 2 phases and scoping for the costs to be over the first 18 months or so. And it looks like the phase 2 will be around 18 months or so, or in the second year. And so would that $1 million capital budget be inclusive of phase 2 as well?
The RFP said no. Yeah.
The $1 million are for the phase 1 costs. Phase 2 has yet to be scoped out in detail, so the $1 million was strictly phase 1.
Yeah.
So speaking of the phase 2 requirements, you've listed role mining, multi-factor authentication, and privileged user management. These are pieces of software that could very well help make up your mind about a specific vendor. Are you planning to include those in the 1-hour demonstration?
Now, Dave, you correct me if I'm mistaken, okay? But my understanding of the RFP is that the scope of the RFP includes phase 1 requirements only. We wanted to give you an idea as to where we were planning to go in the future with this particular solution. And so we felt that it might be helpful, that there may be things in that you may be able to address as a value add, something that will tweak you as to where we're planning to take the solution in the future. But I think we made it pretty clear in the RFP that phase 2 is not to be included in your proposal solution as it relates to the cost and the scope of work. Dave, have I got that right? Thank you. Come on, you're not going to let us off that easy, are you? You just want coffee and cookies.
You did kind of mention that the cost, if we have any cost questions, to send in our questions directly to you. But can you share maybe what the variables would be? So essentially someone said if we go over budget, would we be deducted if we go over that $1 million budget on the cost section?
The way costing works, and again, we'll have to revisit that budget question. I think the intent is that, again, if we're getting information now, what I'm hearing is that maybe that budget is not as reliable or not as doesn't match the scope. Which again, based on your expertise, they just did their best to say that this is what we anticipate. But if that's incorrect, again, we need to be made aware of that. So that needs to be asked before you submit a proposal. If you do submit a proposal, again, the way the costing works on that last page I showed you is that the 250 points is assigned to the best. So all of these, 1,000 points, each one of these goes to the best. And for cost, that's the lowest. But in terms of disqualification because over budget, again, that'll have to be a formally addressed question. I don't believe the intent is to do that. Another option is to think about, again, what we've put in front of you, and that's the base. And any of the value-added options we talked about, those are not included in cost. So if there's something we missed or something that needs to get us to that gap, it needs to be identified in the value adds as well.
Did you just say that the lowest cost response will get the highest score
Yes.
for the cost?
Yes.
I guess it's just interesting to award so many points to the cost line when we're going through this methodology and it's all about best value and making sure technology is in line in the
Yes.
It just seems like it would
Yes.
be weighted a bit less than what's there.
Yeah, so the question being about the weight of cost versus the weight of performance. And again, what we've seen in our experience is that in a public environment, there are constraints. And those constraints are scope, time, and money. So we're trying to be the best to be honest and say that the university has this much money. Again, ask us if that's truly the ceiling. But in the case of cost being a constraint, if we didn't put cost up there, it would be entirely performance. And the university ultimately is responsible to spending funds correctly. So at 25%, I'd say that's a lot lower than most systems would be. I've seen as high, the low bid situation is 100% cost. They ask for other factors, but those don't actually have a weight on the decision. What we're saying is 75% of performance weights that decision, and cost is important because, again, it's public funds, it's a public institution. So I think that's kind of the constraint that we're faced with. But again, if the $1 million is starting to make us feel uncomfortable, we need to be aware of that because that was our assumption. Did that answer your question? I know it's kind of many questions in one.
Do you want me to respond to your question, or
To my question?
Right, is like if that number is. not-
Let's be honest now, is it? I mean,
Yeah, in
is,
terms of complete transparency, if you're talking about licensing and as well as services, and first year maintenance, I mean, yeah, we understand it's a university, and I actually haven't done the numbers or anything, but that does seem quite low for an identity project.
okay.
And then also further to that, in terms of phase 1 and phase 2, kind of the functional requirements for phase 2 that, you know, that are potential, it just seems like those functionalities would be in a complete identity system.
Okay.
So it's almost like phase 2 should be in consideration with the phase 1 evaluation.
Okay. And again, thank you for being open and thank you for your feedback. The university will have to kind of sit on that for a little bit because right now it's going to be hard to respond to that. But again, let us know if that's not the case or there's some issues. I think I heard from Dave that maybe it sounds like maintenance will not be part of that million, so let us respond to that. But thank you. Someone, you do have the microphone. I think that means you're next.
So can we submit multiple bids with different product companies?
So you are, I'm assuming, an integrator.
Right.
So have we addressed that?
I don't see an issue with that. But again, I would ask you to send your question to Lindsay's attention in writing. Again, as Kristen mentioned, and I appreciate everyone's open and honest candor and questions. It's all very valuable and very helpful to our evaluation committee and my clients. But as Kristen said, this is a vendor education session, so anything that's said here doesn't become part of the official RFP record. So when there are questions that are going to impact how you respond to the RFP document, I would ask that you kindly put those in writing, send them to Lindsay's attention. We'll work with our team and we'll put together a written response to the question, and we will post it on the Purchasing Services Bid Opportunities website alongside the RFP. So you get a chance to see all of the questions and all of the corresponding answers. And if that begets more questions, that's okay too. We want good quality responses from you. So we're not trying to hide anything from you. We want to answer your questions, but we want it to be part of the official record, okay? So off the top of my head, I don't see any problem with multiple bids, but again, let's ask that question and we'll get a formal answer out to everyone. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And there's just one more question is, are you open to cloud-based solutions?
I think you'll have to submit that question as well. But give them some time to think about that. Good questions. Did you have a question as well?
Yes.
Oh, here.
My question is around the professional services side. Is the university open to offshore, or is it required to be on-premise from a service delivery standpoint?
And again, I don't know that we have the answer to that on the spot. So we'll have to make a list of those questions. Good question.
Get my workout this morning.
The RFP indicates that there is a strategy and a roadmap developed, which probably helped to define the budget. So did the university have assistance in developing that strategy, roadmap, and budget? And if so, is that vendor allowed to bid on this?
So the answer is yes. We did conduct an RFP about a year ago, I believe. And it was clearly stated in that RFP document that any vendors who bid on that particular RFP would not be excluded from bidding on the subsequent RFP. The document that was the deliverable from that project will be made available to vendors upon completion and submission of a non-disclosure agreement. And yes, so that vendor is eligible to bid, but they will not be given any preference in the evaluation process, and their bid will be as blind as everyone else's.
One comment just to make about that. Again, I'm not saying what procurement-wise the rules and whatnot, but you know, I'd say don't be discouraged with that statement. One thing that we've seen, especially in services and long-term contracts, is that the incumbent or the one that's most familiar, the designer, sometimes takes for granted that lack of outsider's perspective. So they're kind of in the trenches and they can't see the forest from the trees. They can't see the value, they can't see the extra and the expertise. Typically, there'll be arrangements where there's performance that comes into play, and that performance wasn't actually measured previously. So it's kind of like that vendor gets really comfortable, and sometimes they're the least competitive. So again, I can't say what the rules are and whatnot. I would just encourage you to kind of think that incumbent vendors and designers sometimes don't think outside. They don't think of ways to improve and to seek additional efficiencies because they're kind of just in it. But I can't make that decision for you. Sorry, another question.
Hi, I might have missed a portion of your response. I think you mentioned if we sign a non-disclosure agreement, we'll get access to that information. Will that also give us access to any kind of reports, findings that were shared between that vendor that assisted with the RFP development and the university? Any of those kinds of documentation, reports, findings, will that be shared with us as well?
To be honest, the only document that I'm aware of is the report that was prepared as the first phase. But again, if you have questions when you complete your non-disclosure form, submit it to Lindsay. We will email you out the report. Come through it. If there is any other information that you're seeking, if you have questions about anything else, by all means, ask us the question. We'll work with our clients and we'll provide you with whatever information we possibly can to help you put forward an excellent proposal.
Great questions. So again, the scope-related questions, you'll have to just give the university a little bit of time to respond and to put together, the appropriate response to get you the information you need to put together your proposals. I think that's it. If you have questions you don't feel comfortable asking to the group, just come and see me after. I have my cards here as well. Again, the university wants to thank you for coming and participating and taking this opportunity to use this different system. Safe travels back to wherever you're from.
Thanks very much, everyone.